For many Indian families, America is the dream. A clean, green world where jobs are stable, homes are spacious, and children thrive under the flag of opportunity. But sometimes, behind suburban smiles and manicured lawns, something else grows. Something silent, something dangerous. In the late 2023 and early 2024, news began to surface of not one, not two, but three separate incidents involving Indian American families. Fathers who, by all outward appearances, had it all. Educated, employed, settled. And yet, in three quiet homes across three different states, these men killed their families, wives, children, and then themselves. These aren't just stories of individual tragedy. They are stories of pressure and breakdown, of cultural dislocation and invisible suffering. They raise questions we rarely ask until it's too late. What happens when the dream begins to rot from the inside? This is the story of that one question. This is the story of the Kamals, the Henrys, and the Nagarajappas. Hi everyone, welcome to the Desi Crime Podcast, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest cases from around South Asia. I'm your host Ashwarya.
And I'm Aryan.
And the case that I have for you today, the cases actually, are one that represent a seismic shift in a community abroad.
Ashwarya, it doesn't quite add up, and you and I have stayed in the States, but it's after we left that there's been this sudden rise in stories about murders in the Desi expat community there.
Right.
And so many of those, and there are so many ongoing that are unsolved. And it doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up also because what's really eerie to me is that it's not that they coincide with a sudden rise in hate towards Indians, right? A lot of these aren't racially motivated attacks.
It's in fact within the family.
They're within the family. There's students disappearing. There's students falling to death off of their dorm room buildings. It's really eerie stuff where we don't fully have an explanation of what's going wrong. But yeah, there's been this sudden rise. Chapter 1. The Kamals, the American Dream Realized. It was the kind of house that made you wonder about the lives inside. Set back at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in Dover, Massachusetts, one of the state's wealthiest towns, 10 Wilson's Way was less a home and more a statement. 21 rooms, 11 bathrooms, a 14-seat movie theatre, a 5,000-bottle wine cellar, and a spa. Outside, lion statues flanked the entrance. Inside, marble floors reflected the soft gleam of imported chandeliers.
That sounds like the house of your dreams.
It's a little too big to be the house of my dreams.
She says that.
No, it's true. This is something I've said to Aryan always, that if I could get this home, but in 4 bedrooms, I would love to have that. But that rarely ever happens. 21 bedrooms?
Yeah, but this is the sort of ostentatious shit you're into.
No.
Regardless, how much does this house cost?
We're getting to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're getting to that. And this sprawling mansion was the Kamal's world. But on the 28th of December 2023, it was about to become an infamous crime scene. That morning, Manoj Kamal arrived at 10 Wilson's Way to check up on his brother, 57-year-old Rakesh Kamal, Rakesh's 54-year-old wife Tina, and the couple's 18-year-old daughter Aryana. It had been days now, and nobody in the family had been returning Manoj's calls. While he was met with silence at the home's main door, he wasn't giving up so quickly. Something felt wrong and he needed to make his way inside to stop his mind from assuming the worst. So Manoj circled the periphery of the house moments later and successfully entered through a door that was unlocked but somehow still uninviting. The silence inside was eerie, thick in a way that made you pause before every step. The house was supposed to be empty, but it didn't feel that way. On the table, a typed note awaited. It was addressed to the person scheduled to pick up the house keys. Quote, before entering, call the police to first check the 3 bedrooms on the 2nd floor. Each room will be marked by a white sheet of paper. End quote. Manoj climbed the stairs, unsure whether to believe what he was reading. The first door he opened had the paper taped to it, just as the note described. The handle turned easily. The room inside was still, and at first, unassuming. And then he saw her. his sister-in-law Tina. She was lying in bed, still under the covers, a small hole above her right temple and the unmistakable splatter of close-range gunfire staining the pillow, the sheets, and the wall behind her. Blood had soaked through the fabric, pooling onto the mattress and slowly dripping onto the hardwood floor beneath. The next room was worse. Ariana, barely 18, her whole life ahead of her, was crumpled on her side, her long black hair matted with blood, her phone charger still trailing from the nightstand. The shot had been direct. Too direct. Her eyes were closed, her body peaceful in that disturbing way only death can be. In the last room was Rick, as people affectionately called Rakesh. He lay sprawled backwards, the .40 Glock caliber pistol still within reach. The entry wound to his own head was messier, less deliberate. There was more blood here, more violence in the recoil. It coated the floor tiles and the nearby dresser. The kind of blood that clings to the air, to your clothes, to your mind. The kind that makes you different after seeing it. Manoj didn't scream, he didn't speak. He dialed 911 with fingers that didn't quite seem like his own. In the background, the house remained silent, as if even it didn't want to acknowledge what had happened within its walls. When Dover police arrived at the scene, one thing was obvious. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong or a murder out of brewing business rivalry. This was one in a long line of murder-suicides of Indian-American families the US was going to see. But once they realized this was a murder-suicide, that the seemingly perfect Rakesh Kamal had just ended whatever life once reverberated through his beautiful home, the cops were left grappling with one question. Why? And to understand the why, they and we would have to go back in time to understand who the Kamals really were. In Dover, the Kamals were not just another well-off family. They were aspirational, the type that invited awe and whispers of they must have really figured it out. Rakesh, known casually as Rick, was the polished patriarch, always in a tailored suit, pulling into the office in a brand new Mercedes. His name embroidered on his shirts, his reputation spotless. A former chief technology officer at Harvard Business School Online, an entrepreneur, a man, it seemed, who had climbed every rung of the American dream. Tina, his wife and the home's matriarch, was just as magnetic in her own quiet way. Elegant, engaged, and deeply involved in the life of her daughter's elite private school. She was the president of Milton Academy's Upper School Parents Association, a donor to the Red Cross, and a member of the organization's exclusive Tiffany Circle, reserved for women who gave at least $10,000 a year. Tina did it all, said one fellow volunteer. You name it, she was involved. Their daughter, Ariana, who was 18, was the jewel of their family crown. A gifted musician, a choir member at Middlebury College, a vibrant teenager who posted candid moments with her parents and affectionate jokes about her dad's mispronunciations. She ribbed him about how he said the word matcha, for example. She called her mom her best friend. She dreamt of playing ABBA's Waterloo at her own wedding, the same song that had played at her parents'. Their home reflected all of this. The sprawling estate they purchased for $4 million on Valentine's Day 2019 was a palace, built to impress, decorated to suggest permanence, stability, success. Quote, this is how you arrive, the Kamals seemed to be saying, and few questioned it. After all, what could possibly go wrong in a house with a movie theatre, an indoor pool, and a 4-car garage? Friends, colleagues, neighbors, even family. No one saw a crack in the glass. But there were cracks, and they'd been widening for years. It began quietly, as these things do. A missed payment, a promise delayed, a silent recalculation in the dark of the night. By the time the world caught up, the collapse had already happened. The Kamals' $4 million mansion had never really belonged to them, not in the way people imagined. They hadn't secured the home through a traditional bank, but through a private mortgage, $3.8 million borrowed from the builder himself. And the terms were brutal. It was a balloon loan with the full balance due in just 2 years. By 2021, the payments had stopped. Interest piled on. Fines mounted. Rick tried to restructure, to renegotiate, but the numbers didn't lie. Eventually, a foreclosure notice followed. Then, a court order. On December 11, 2023, a judge granted approval for their eviction. But their home was far from their only financial strain. For years, Rick had maintained the illusion of entrepreneurship. His company, Edunova, promised cutting-edge tools for student access. It boasted awards, big names, and academic affiliations. But behind the glossy website were fabrications. Former freelancers were falsely listed as senior staff. Rick claimed to hold a degree from MIT Sloan. In truth, he had only taken non-degree executive courses. Tina's bio described her as a Harvard alumna, though the university had no record of her ever attending. The company's most tangible accomplishment was a $150,000 single grant from the National Science Foundation, which too was dissolved by the state of Massachusetts in 2021 for failing to file its annual reports. Meanwhile, the debts were real. Rick borrowed heavily from family, $500,000 from his brother-in-law Sandeep Bedi, a quote substantial sum from his own brother Manoj. He forbade them from telling Tina, and they didn't, because they too believed the illusion. He was, after all, Rick Kamal, the genius, the gentleman, the man with a plan. Even in the final months, as legal proceedings moved to evict them from their mansion, Rick was telling everyone that they were buying again. This time, it was going to be a $16.5 million estate on the edge of Tennessee's Chickamauga Lake. Tina had already begun shopping for furniture. Ariana had walked through the new house, envisioning a new life there. The seller's attorney had been shown bank statements. There was even a verbal agreement in place.
Aishwarya, did his wife, I'm guessing the daughter was not kept in loop at all.
Right.
But in terms of the foreclosure notice, the eviction notice, was this something the wife was aware of?
From all accounts, she absolutely had no idea. And hence her going and buying this really expensive furniture for a new home, which is like four times the cost.
4 times, $16.5 million.
$1 million.
That's like buying one of those Gurgaon apartments in Chickamauga Lake or whatever that's called.
Literally.
That's absurd. But how do you hide an eviction notice from your own family?
I think you hide it till the point that you can't anymore. And when you can't anymore, you end up in a tragedy of this kind. So everything for this new house was in place. There was a verbal agreement. But then suddenly, Rick said he was leaving for a business trip to China and stopped responding to messages. The contract went unsigned. Just as the dream had begun, it vanished. Now, in most homes, like our aunt said, the truth eventually leaks through. A bill misplaced, a change in tone, a confession whispered after the kids are asleep. But not in the Kamal household. Tina Kamal believed her husband was still working at Harvard Business School online. She believed Edunova was thriving. She believed they were somehow on the verge of buying a second, more extravagant estate. She believed, in short, that they were living the life she'd spent years helping build. And Tina, for her part, stayed busy too. She chaired fundraisers, attended board meetings, planned webinars during the pandemic for Milton Academy parents. She was everywhere. To her friends, she was gracious and warm. To her daughter, a trusted confidant. Nothing about her demeanor suggested fear or concern. And she wasn't alone. Sandeep Bedi, Tina's brother, had loaned Rick $500,000. But when he offered to tell Tina, Rick refused. Quote, "He made me swear I wouldn't say anything," Bedi later said. "I would never in my wildest dreams question what Rick was doing," end quote. In their family, Rick had been placed on a pedestal, respected not just for his intellect, but for his calm, his confidence, his unfailing sense of control. "He lied to all of us," Bedi said, "and yet we believed him. That's what makes it so unbearable," end quote. And Ariana, barely through her first semester of college, had even fewer reasons to doubt anything. She was focused on school, on her choir, on her music, on her new boyfriend. In texts, she wrote poetry. In photos, she beamed. She teased her parents, posted sentimental memories, and planned her return home for the holidays. No one saw the edge of the cliff they were all standing on. Not her mother, not her uncle, not her friends, not even Ariana herself. The only person who knew, the only person who could see the edge of the cliff was Kamal, and one piece of paper delivered to him in late 2023 was going to push him over the edge. The order came on December 11th, 2023. The Kamals were to be evicted. Wilsondale Associates, the private lender that had both built and financed their home, was finally calling time. After years of non-payment, extensions and negotiations, the court had ruled the home could no longer be theirs. But the illusion didn't end. Not yet. In those final days, Tina was still shopping for furniture for her Tennessee chateau. Ariana was home for winter break, unaware that the mansion she'd grown up in was no longer theirs. There were no visible signs of packing, no goodbyes, just the quiet ticking of a clock that only one man seemed to hear. On December 24th, 4 days before the murders, a fax arrived at Genworth, a Virginia-based life insurance company. It was signed by Tina Kamal. It requested a change to her $1.25 million insurance policy. Rakesh and Ariana were now listed as primary beneficiaries. Rakesh's brother Manoj was added as the contingent or backup. Whether Tina sent that fax willingly or even knowingly remains unclear, but it is this fax that points to conjecture that maybe the plan was never to kill the whole family. But then came December 28th, the day the eviction was scheduled to take effect. That same day, Manoj entered the home and made the discovery that would change everything. In the rooms upstairs, police would find the bodies, a typed note, carefully placed, methodical, instructing whoever found it to first contact authorities, and the weapon, a .40 caliber Glock 22, unregistered, right next to Rakesh's body. The shots were close range, each woman hit multiple times in the head. There were no signs of struggle, no cries for help, no one had seen it coming. What Tina and Ariana didn't know, what perhaps even Rakesh could not fully bear, was that everything they believed was already gone.
Hearing something like this is just a tragedy.
It wasn't expected, especially in this quiet neighborhood.
The news broke within hours. A family of 3 found dead in a mansion in Dover. The story echoed outwards, first through local headlines, then national media, then across oceans to India, where both Rick and Tina had deep family roots. Neighbors were stunned, friends were disoriented, people searched for clues, for reason, but the story refused to offer those to them. Rick Kamal, who once handed a landscaper his credit card and told him not to worry about the cost, had been drowning in debt. Tina, who organized donut giveaways for her daughter's school, was kept in the dark until the very end. And Ariana, bright, gifted, beloved, was never ever given a chance. For Sandeep Bedi, the grief was tangled in betrayal. Quote, "We put him up on a pedestal so high you cannot imagine. So now, for us to reconcile not just that he murdered my sister and niece, but that he was lying to us for years, it just cannot even sink in." End quote. Since the murders, the estate has gone back on the market. Realtor.com eerily calls it, quote, "the perfect home for entertaining," making no mention of what happened inside. The same grandiose language remains: sun-drenched stone verandas, peaceful views, meticulously maintained, as if memory could be landscaped over, as if blood doesn't linger in the walls. In probate court, Manoj, Kamal and Sandeep Bedi have begun sorting through what Rick left behind: financial records, unpaid loans, insurance claims, the paperwork of a life that was, in the end, deeply and devastatingly false. There is only one sliver of comfort, Bedi said. They were asleep. Tina and Ariana, in those final moments, didn't see it coming, didn't feel the fear, didn't know what was happening. Quote, "That ignorance is bliss," Bedi said. They didn't see it coming. Chapter 2. The Henrys, the family next door. To finish listening to this episode and others like it that will now exclusively be available for Patreon and YouTube members, head over to the link in the description and become a member today. Members will now get 2 exclusive Desi Crime episodes every month, along with a ton of other benefits. We can't wait to see you all there.